AirPods. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. All right.
Okay, good. All right.
So I've been live for a little bit. So whoever was watching for the last 10 minutes, just watching a blank screen, listening to the intro song. Sorry. Good thing it's a good song. You know what I mean?
Jesus.
Yeah, that's once again technology. Well, what do you do? We're here now. That's all that matters. All right, introduce yourself. Let's kick it off. Let's get straight into this bad boy.
All right. Well, I mean, where do I start?
Name?
Aleks,
Where you been?
Svetski, rabid Bitcoiner. I've sort of been an entrepreneur, I guess, for quite a number of years. Actually, it's probably the only thing I've ever done. I had a job for 2 weeks when I was 16. I got fired and then never worked for anyone ever again. And
who'd you work for?
yeah, it's been a Domino's Pizza. I crashed the car twice.
That makes sense. If you're gonna fire somebody for something, that's probably it. You know.
I know that's the extent of my employability. Who gets fired from Domino's Pizza?
Yeah, that's right. It's a bit of a.
So,
you know, I think that's like I think you get a medal for that, right? They fire you, but they're like, you've earned this. Take it with you.
Yep.
Because you're the first person in Domino's history to be fired.
Yeah, exactly. So that's I figured if I got booted from there, I'd be unemployable. So I just figured I'd fucking work for myself for the rest of my life. Here we are.
Much better option, right? Much better.
Well, look, in some cases, yes. But I think, you know, one thing I have learned is that there's a lot of, I don't know, on the surface, you know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, being your own boss and, you know, all this sort of stuff is great. But you know, I actually think for probably 90% of people, it's a really bad idea. It requires a particular personality type to want to work for yourself. And that's one that is, you know, really, how can I say, you know, able to deal with uncertainty, able to deal with, you know, not being paid, for example, for doing a bunch of work, able to deal with loss, you know, able to deal with inconsistency, like all of that sort of stuff, like you need to be able to handle if you're going to be running your own business. And for a lot of people, it's actually, you know, better off to just work, you know, at, you know, maybe not Domino's Pizza as a pizza driver, but just sort of working a job, because it, you know, it removes a lot of the uncertainty that comes with, you know, doing things yourself and for yourself. So anyway, I just think that's, in some ways it's better, in some ways it's not, you know. And then probably the other thing that people don't realize is they think that they're, you know, going to set up a business and work less because they have other people working for them. But, you know, what ends up happening is, you know, as an employee, you're responsible from, you know, 9 to 5. But as a business owner, you're responsible from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. It's like, you know, you swapped your 9 to 5 to 5 to 9.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those people.
Different. Sorry,
you go.
No, I was going to say it's a different gig.
Yeah, it's something that a lot of people don't take on board. Like I run my own business. It's it creates me and my partner argue all the time because you're always doing something, always on your phone, always on a computer, always, you know. It never ends. And it's I think if you go into the mentality of owning a business or doing something for yourself where you're going to just do a 9 to 5, I've seen a lot of businesses. So I used to be a personal trainer, for instance, and a lot of PTs used to come in, and I think the whole notion of being a business owner as a PT, that same thing, you just work when you want, which is fine. You can work when you want, but you're not going to make any money.
Yeah.
A lot of them used to come in and, like, because PTs make a decent hourly, and they go, oh, I'm just going to work 4 hours today, and I'm going to just work 4 hours every day. Probably come in at about 10. You're like, you've already missed your window. You know what I mean? And they just, and you'd watch them fail so quickly because they just didn't want to step up to it. They just wanted to work a couple of hours a day and then go home and live that life of your expectation of what a business owner is, I guess. You get tons of money, you get tons of free time. You can just sort of kick back and yeah, like you said, watch your employees do the work.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. Not at least for the first 10 years of running a business.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, after 10 years, if you've sort of done it well, you may have built up the systems, the processes, and the procedures in order for it to maintain itself. But in the beginning, like fucking, basically, here's the trade-off. It's like people always think there's a hack in life, and there really isn't. Like the trade-off is that as a business owner, you'll load your first 10 years in terms of like you'll do more hours and more fucking headache and more stress and take on more responsibility in that first 10 years of building up your career as a business owner in whatever field or industry you're in. And you'll do more then than most employees will work in their entire lives.
Yeah.
But you'll load it on the front end. And then, you'll if successful, if you made the right moves, if you were intelligent along the way, et cetera, you'll get to reap the reward of that on the long term by being able to then dictate your hours and do what you want to do. And, you'll have set up the procedures and processes for other people to do the heavy lifting. But there's no way out of that. It's like, the question isn't, what's the easy way? The question is, which path do you want to walk? And one is a really steep climb in the beginning. You're gonna be fucking scaling a cliff face where the chances of actually falling are real. Like, you're doing it without a harness. Or do you want to take the long walk, which is not so steep, but you'll be walking for 60 years. And that's kind of I think the real way to frame up running one's own business, because for many people, taking the long, slow, easy path is better.
Yeah, I think that's applicable to life though. You can if you don't sacrifice anything, there's no reward. You can apply that to general health. If you feel as though you're overweight and you want to get thin, you have to sacrifice something. If you want to, you want to, study early on or leave it till later when you're a bit older, you're going to have to sacrifice sleep. You know what I mean? There's always that bit of sacrifice to get to where you need to. And I think the more, as you're saying, the more you sacrifice in the beginning, or the more you're going to reap at the end, where you're not struggling so hard to gain something. I think there's, like you said, that perception of just getting it all at once and it being handed to you, and it's such a weird anomaly that ever happens. I don't think any business has been created where it's just sort of kicked off immediately, and then people sort of, like, owners have reaped the rewards like straight away, straight off the bat. I don't think it's, and if it does, it's once again, it's a rarity. And then the longevity of those businesses sort of suffers because you're kind of tripping over your feet a lot as well. So,
there's a huge element of luck sometimes. So there's I don't know if you've ever read Taleb's books, like Black Swan, Fool by Randomness, and all that sort of stuff. But in Fool by Randomness, he talks about how there's a lot of people these days who basically and this you'll find across markets, across business, across all sorts of industries, is that you've got these people who misinterpret luck, for example, for skill.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of cases of people who just literally are in the right place at the right time, and they overestimate their own capabilities. And then they think that, I've got all this sorted out because I'm a fucking genius.
Yeah.
It's funny. The younger you are, the more you think like that. Because when I was young, that's what I thought. Like, I made my first $1 million by the time I was 23. Thought I was a fucking genius, and then managed to be broke and destitute by the time I was 26. And not through spending money partying or doing any of that sort of stuff. I actually reinvested into more businesses, thinking that I had this fucking formula, that I knew what I was doing. I opened up a gym. I started importing LED lights from fucking China to go onto that trend and all this sort of stuff. And then there was an Achilles heel, which is I had installed God knows how many millions of dollars, I think $20-30 million worth of solar panels. And we had a debt outstanding with the government, and the government reneged on, I think, $1 billion worth of rebates at the time, and all these companies went bankrupt in the process, and we did too. Like, I lost $2.5 million overnight, and everything else got wiped out in one shot. And if I was more prudent, if I was a bit older, if I was more intelligent about how I ran businesses and all that sort of stuff at that age, maybe I could have avoided a lot of that, and I could have set my business up to be more robust. But that's sort of the cost of early success in some ways, is that you don't know what you don't know, and life comes at you fast when things go wrong. And these days I'm a little bit older, and I've had these really fucking messed up experiences along the way, where now I'm like, far more prudent about how I approach any business or any endeavor that I want to run. That doesn't sort of take away from still being, a renegade and still like pushing the envelope on what's possible and things like that. But, in many ways you put controls around that. And you learn things that you could have only learned by making those fuck ups in the first place. And kind of like what you said, it's, if you want to lose weight, there's a cost, and the cost is you got to train your ass off, you got to eat right, you got to be disciplined, you got to be strict, you got to do all that sort of stuff. Now, the cost of not doing that and just being a fat lazy shit, for example, is that in the future you're going to have health problems. You're probably going to fucking die young. You're not going to be attractive. Like, or like every action in life has a cost and has a reaction.
Yep.
And all life is just a case of picking which costs you're willing to pay. Like, I'm actually a cheap bastard. I don't want to pay the cost of being a fat shit in the future, so I pay the cost of training now so that I can maintain good health. I pay the cost of working my ass off now because I don't want to be subject to being broke and destitute in the future. And that's kind of the trade-off that people need to realize is what life's about, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's also like a bit of an aspect of obviously there's variations of this. So hard work is good, but if you're working in the wrong direction, it's kind of pointless. There's there's a huge amount of factors that go into this. So a lot of people hear your story and kind of go like it's a one-off, you know what I mean? But I think once again you have to factor in like a little bit of luck, a little bit of, once again, that skill that you had, perseverance, but also access to the opportunities. And I think that a lot of people sort of sell themselves short when it does come to lack of opportunity, because it's something that's, I don't know, like I grew up poor, so opportunity was big for me, but then there's that always that aspect of like you have to go out and find it. Do you get a lot of people coming up to you just really writing your story off on just pure luck, and you know what I mean? Like you've done nothing for it. You've just been in a position where you could do so. Like, what was your upbringing? So were you one of these like generationally rich kids that had access to resources to get you to this situation, or was it self-built?
Yeah, no, not at all. My parents were, working class, like immigrants. They came from war-torn sort of Macedonia, Eastern Europe, and they came to Australia with nothing. My dad came here, I think, when he was 16. They sort of escaped all the crazy shit that was going on and the war back then. And they came here and worked hard. Like my dad was working 2 or 3 jobs all his life, basically. Whether as a cleaner or working in the BP and Shell refineries and like fucking cleaning the chimneys and stuff. Like all this ugly, dirty fucking work, right?
Yeah.
And my mum worked hard as well. She worked as, whether it was at the chemist or as a receptionist or as this or that, like all sorts of stuff, and busted her ass too. And we like, it was a broken family that I came from though. So like my parents split up sort of on their 12th or 13th year of marriage. I think I was 11, my brother was 10, and there was this like crazy custody battle and all this sort of shit. And my brother and my sister went one way, I went the other, and then I ended up having to take care of my grandma in my young years because me and my dad couldn't get along anymore. So I sort of and it was like those sort of formative experiences in my life, they sort of shaped me in becoming a resourceful young person. And I ended up at the end of it sort of moving out on my own when I was 17, 18, with nothing, and then kind of started from there. I had, I was good academically, got some scholarship money from the university, and I then took my scholarship money and I put it on the stock market.
Good choice.
And taught myself to trade. Well, sort of. I mean, I basically, looking back on it now, I was technically a gambling degenerate, because I was trading options and warrants. I was trading derivatives, and this is back in 2007, right? So this is before, Robinhood, before any of these sort of things. Like this was still before we had LCD screens. Like I had a big, fat, white, those CRT monitors from back in the day, sitting in my room, and like I would basically between lectures sprint to the library and jump on. We had 100 hours worth of internet back then per month that we were allowed to access the internet. And, I'd sort of run there and look at my stocks and be like, oh yeah, I'm making money. Oh, fuck, I'm not. And then, run home at the end of uni and sort of try and figure out what's going on there and like trade and learn and read and all this sort of shit. And anyway, like I turned my $5,000 of scholarship money into like 50. And then after that, sort of the 2007 pre-GFC tremors happened. I can't remember if it was Lehman or Bear Stearns or one of those guys went bust. Basically, I got fucking wiped, my entire account. Like I think in one day on August the 16th, like I lost, I think 80% of my account in one day because I was levered up. And then in the space of 6 months thereafter, I managed to get a bunch of loans from the bank and margin and all this sort of shit. And anyway, basically, my dream to be a millionaire when I turned 20 turned into I was $250,000 in debt when I was 20 years old.
Going the other way.
Yeah, exactly. So I had the stick in reverse, not in first gear. And so yes, so in many ways, I guess I started my 20s, $250,000 behind everyone. I still remember my friends at uni. They're like, "Oh man, I got the $600 credit card bill." I was like, "Ah, yeah, really?
Yeah, cute.
Here's my bill, $60,000 from Westpac, $96,000 from ANZ, got so much from elsewhere." I was like, I had to make $1,500 a week before I could eat, and that sort of forced me to work my ass off, man, and figure it out.
Yeah, so it's that's a wild ride, especially in your early 20s. I don't think a lot of early 20s even has the like I didn't. There's no I knew work ethic, but there's no I don't think there's any stress attached to it. It's just related to hours into hours out. You know what I mean? At a workplace rather than like investing at any type, which is crazy, especially back then. It's like now, like you said, it's a lot easier for people to sort of get involved and make a bit of money. What happened after all of this? So you lost it all. You started making it back. Like what happens then?
Yeah,
what were your next couple of moves?
So I was behind, and then the only thing I could do was so I couldn't afford to stay at uni basically. So I had to drop out, and the only thing I could find on short notice. So I didn't have a resume, I didn't have a job, I didn't have any of that, and I was like, "Fucking hell, what do I do?" And basically, I found this place where it was sort of door-to-door sales, selling fucking Ozstar or Foxtel or something, pay TV.
Yep.
And selling that door to door, and it was a commission-only job. So you get a sale, you get paid. You don't get a sale, sorry man, you don't get paid shit.
Yeah.
And that was sort of my thing that I didn't even have a TV, dude. Like I ended up moving into one of the salespeople's apartments, and I lived on his lounge room floor on this shitty fucking mattress. And I would basically go to the office in the morning, train up new people, and then go out and knock on doors for 9 hours from like midday to 9 p.m. And then I'd come back home. I would then read about the stock market, read about economics, and try and figure out how in the hell did I get this shit so wrong and how did I lose everything?
Yeah.
And then sort of repeat the cycle the next morning. Train in the morning, get up at 5 a.m., train, get ready, get to the office, teach people sales, go out on the field from 12, knock on fucking doors for 9 hours. And I did that, and I became the best I think definitely the best salesperson in our region. I think the third best in the country for selling pay TV. And I didn't even know what the fuck was on the TV. And what I learned was that it's, like selling is about building a relationship. And I learned how to build rapport really quickly at the door. And, I learned, again, the work ethic. I would, my diet consisted of 4 cans of fucking tuna a day. And I would have 2 cans in each pocket. And basically I'd sprint between houses That was my, training during the day. And I would only eat a can of tuna if I got a sale. And on average, like, people would get 4 or 5 sales a week. I got so good, I was doing 4 sales a day on average. So then I could eat my 4 cans of tuna.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, like I kind of dug my way out of that initially there. I like after a while, it felt like I was selling my soul because I didn't believe in what I was selling, and I was like, people shouldn't be watching TV anyway. So then I kind of left that, kind of went to set up my own little sales company on the side, and then I sold phone plans for Optus in the early days, and then the contractor that I was selling for, we had a dispute, they didn't pay me, so then kind of I depleted my savings again, so I had to go back and door knock again for another 6 months. But then the second time around, I set up my own sales company, and that time it was successful. And that's how I basically ended up digging out of the $250,000 hole. And once I sort of dug out of that, I was in a position to sort of start to expand and build on the foundation. And that's when I set up, I started selling for other solar companies. I was like, man, I can sell basically anything door to door. So fuck it, I'll sell for these solar companies. So we went from selling small ticket items to selling big ticket items, and that was a huge transition. We went from selling something 50 or $100 at the door to like 15, 20 grand. And I remember the first 3 weeks of it, like we're like, hey there, he just says like, people would get all excited and they're like, so how much? I'm like, well, this system starts at 15,000. They'll be like, yeah, mate, you can leave now. Like, what the fuck? But we figured that out, and we started getting better at that. And I remember the tipping point for that was me and a friend. We'd been knocking on doors for 3 weeks, and we didn't have a single sale. And we're like, man, this is fucking impossible. There's no way we can do this. Like, we're sitting there like negged out in the car and thinking, this is fucked. We're going to be selling trinkets for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
And we were just like, what, fuck it. Let's just go one more time. Let's just knock around one more block. We'll figure this out. And we knocked and knocked and knocked and knocked. And one guy actually, let us in. He was interested, and we scored the fucking sale. And then over the next day or two, there was another few people that called us back and signed up, and we sold like 100 grand worth of systems in, those 2 days.
Damn.
And then, the momentum picked up, and then, built that up. And I went from just selling solar panels to then supply, install. I did the whole supply chain along the way. And that was where my first real, I would say, successful business emerged. So that's that kind of, that chapter of the journey, which was,
I think it sort of highlights that mentality as well, especially with like owning a business. I remember having a discussion with somebody one day about it. And I think if you come from a place where the word no doesn't scare you, I think you're probably a little bit better equipped to handle your own business. Just getting knocked back all the time is something that a lot of people are not used to, and they definitely don't like. Being told no, or having a door jammed in your face, or being told to fuck off. You know what I mean? It really sort of, you go, I don't want to do this anymore. It's that weird amount of like perseverance and that grind that you have to kind of go, like, I've committed 100% to my idea and I'm going to see it through.
It's really hard, man. Like, it really, really is. Like, you've got to, like, I saw when I was training people to do sales, like, there was, the churn rate is incredible, especially in commission-only sales jobs. Like, we were actually more a recruitment company than we were a sales company, because we spent more time trying to bring people in to train them up as salespeople than we did actually going out on the field and actually selling. It was wild. And, it takes, like you said, it takes a particular type of personality, someone who's willing or has a reason to keep going despite the no. Now, I've always been an introvert, like a super, super introverted person. I don't like interacting with people. And my idea of a good night out is, staying at home, watching a movie or reading a book. Like, that's sort of my version of a party.
Yeah.
And, for me, going out there and knocking on doors was super fucking intimidating. Like, but the thing is, I had to. So, like, I had, like, thinking carrot and a stick. Like, I had a big fucking stick that was poking me, that, gave me very little choice but to go out and do something. And I guess this is where, the importance of hardship is. I think we live in a world today that is being completely, and I don't want to say this word, but it's like in the traditional sense of it's become pussified. So there's a guy I love called CT Fletcher.
I
don't know
love
if you know him,
CT.
but yeah, he's a fucking legend. And he
CT's
talks
great.
about the pussification of the humanity, right? And
Yeah.
he's like, what we are doing is we're fucking weakening humanity. And if we've seen anything in the last year, is this whole hell-bent attempt on fucking promoting safety over everything else. And we've completely devastated the entire world. We've destroyed so many people's fucking lives. We've locked them inside. We've told them, it's healthy to fucking put a face diaper on and breathe through that shit and sit inside, watch Netflix, eat fast food, and distance yourself from fucking every other human being. It's like all for safety, all for this fucking thin veneer or fake promise that by isolating yourself as a human being and not exposing yourself to anything, you will somehow be safe. It's the most ridiculous, pathetic form of, life, or the most pathetic form of philosophy that can exist. And this is, again, it's contrary to how human beings grow, evolve, and adapt. And we I don't know. Society is hell bent on optimizing safety and comfort as opposed to optimizing for freedom and growth. And what we are seeing is, like I said, the pussification of humanity. We are seeing the weakening of, people, of individuals, of institutions, and of everything around us. And it's not a good trend.
I agree, like to an extent. I think last year that's a hard topic, man. And it's like, where do you sort of draw the line in regards to, like, for me, I guess, like my thing with COVID always relates back to, like, I have a sick dad, so it's very hard, and it was risk versus reward. But to an extent, I think there, like you said, there's an aspect of, a lot of people complained about something that they could have controlled a lot better. And then what part of that did they want to sit at home eating food, being lazy fucks? You know what I mean? Like, I think we exaggerated something that could have been dealt with and handled a lot better. But I agree with you in a sense that, like, we are softening the edges a little bit too much. There's definitely a massive overcorrection. I think with all the platforms and stuff that we have now, some of these causes are fantastic that are bringing light to things that shouldn't happen. But I think there's the fringe of it where it's trying to soften the edges too much, where you can't do anything, you can't say anything, you can't, this witch hunt culture that we have going on at the moment is really a way to
be on the fringe, my friend.
Yeah,
be on the fringe.
Yeah, but
be on the fringe. We're living in the oppression. I call it the oppression Olympics. Everyone is, everyone is trying to complain about, I'm a bigger victim than you are.
That's
so
that
give
is
me a hand up.
But I think that's the thing, right? It's like if you can't achieve something in your life, there's a pissing competition with who has it the worst. I've experienced this my whole life, and I've always been very, like, wary of people who do it. As you said, it's like it always started with me with who has a less amount of sleep. People used to argue with me on a regular basis. I don't sleep well, and it's like, well, I sleep well for me. I get 4 to 6 hours. I'm happy with that. And people are like, "Oh, you only got this amount? I got this amount." And you're like, that's not what I'm saying it for. I'm just saying that that's how much sleep I get. You know what I mean? But it is that. I think it's just ingrained in you. If you're not good at something, be good at being bad. You know what I mean? So it's, it's
easier to tear something down than it is to build it.
Yeah, but that's right.
That's a natural tendency.
And we also, like, I think we demonize hard work in a sense. Like, if you see somebody working hard or doing something great, like, unless it's handed to them, it's a weird polarizing thing where it's like we look up to people like the Kardashians, right? And we go, oh, they're ultra famous and they're fantastic and we want what they have. But then you kind of like, well, as soon as somebody says they're doing well in life, you immediately attach it to something like I said, they've been handed it, or they've done this for it, or that this has happened to cause this, rather than just saying well done. You know what I mean? But I think you get more praise if you go, oh, I fucked up my life this bad. Give me sympathy, give me pity. And I think we've really, as you said, we've really played into it, and it's really softened the edges where it's gone beyond like understanding people and wanting to sympathize to just a really blatant, softened approach to life now, where it's, we have to cater for everybody's problems. But I think as soon as you say that, people are like, but my problems need to be heard. Like, what about me and my problems? Why do they get it and I don't? And you're like, some people need it and some people definitely don't.
Well, this is the problem with again, you choose to optimize for building strength and freedom, or you choose to optimize for building safety and comfort. They're actually diametrically opposed. You can't, like, the optimization matters, and we're not building strong humans anymore. We're building weak humans for the purpose of living within a comfort zone. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie WALL-E, the Disney one where you've got the little robot.
The robot, yeah.
It was the little junk robot. Remember the humans at the end, right? They're sort of on these fucking floating chairs, and they've got sort of that's the direction humanity's moving towards, because we vilified being strong, we vilified being outstanding, we vilified greatness. Like we've elevated mediocrity, we've elevated the average, we've elevated the oppression, the virtue of the oppressed. And it's extremely dangerous as a precedent, because what happens is it becomes okay to be average, it becomes okay to be fat, it becomes okay to be mediocre, it becomes okay to just be that. And the problem is if people want to choose to be average on an individual level, that's fucking fine. You can do that for yourself. But to sort of use that as then a basis to force somebody else who's chosen to sacrifice, or who's chosen greatness through sacrifice, and then enforce payment upon that person to lift the average up, that is fucking immoral. Yeah. So it's like, someone who works their fucking asses off, for example, builds a business, does something, and then the person who does nothing and chooses to be mediocre and chooses to fucking scream about, I'm, the winner of the oppression Olympics this month. And then you have to take from the person who's chosen greatness and sacrificed for greatness to give to the other idiot. And that's fucked up. And what that does is it creates really bad base incentives in society, which is, well, why the fuck should I work? Why the fuck should I, sacrifice everything just so that I can have half my shit confiscated by morons in a government to give to whoever's screaming the loudest this week or this month for their oppression. And then you end up getting, you basically erode the number of individuals willing to push the limit and willing to grow and willing to create and willing to produce. And so you diminish that number and you increase the number of basically leeches and moochers. And that has a really dangerous impact on society. And again, that's the trend that we're on now, and that needs to be fucking reversed wildly. Like, it needs to seriously be reversed, because it's not going to get better. It keeps accelerating. This is the problem with trends.
Yeah. It's one of those things. It's like, I think even people who will listen to this will immediately be triggered by something. Like, I'm not saying everybody, but some of them, where they're like, there shouldn't be this, there shouldn't be people making so much money or doing so much. And I think it's one of those things. It's like, it's once again, it's a hard topic, because how do you separate the people who need it from the people who want it? Like, where's that defined line? I think that line has been blurred so much. I believe that there's people out there that need help. I think there's people out there that can provide help, but I think the problem is they're not connected because of the people in the middle. I think some of the people in the middle, once again, it's exactly what you're saying. Where rather than I think it comes down to capability. They have this ability to do it, but they don't want to. They just want the free ride. But then there's the people who don't have the capability, who don't have the access, that need a bit of help. But once again, they don't have access to the people who are doing it to learn and to better themselves.
There's an important nuance there about help. Help must be voluntary. It cannot be
forced. Yeah,
enforced. Exactly. So as soon as help is something that becomes forced, then that is actually the definition of slavery. So if there is someone in need, so need is a thing that exists. The thing is, nobody needs to help somebody in need. People need to want to help somebody in need. And this is where things get really fucking dicey. Is all these people who are running around being social justice warriors say you must care about this cause, this cause, this cause, this cause. You must so everything in existence has a ledger. We were talking earlier about if the idea of cost. If you don't want to be fat, you need to train and eat less.
Yep.
Fucking simple equation.
Yeah.
So that there's a cost to being healthy, right? And there's a cost to not being healthy. Now, in the world of rights, the other side of the ledger of rights, and this is what people don't fucking understand, is that there is responsibility. So if somebody has a right to have a house, that means that is somebody else's responsibility to build that fucking house, which means you are enslaving another for the supposed right of the former, which doesn't fucking work. It doesn't scale. Like that is not how society is built. There's actually only, for example, I don't believe in human rights at all. There's only one single human right, and that is the capacity to choose, or the right to choose. You don't have any other rights. Now, if your actions diminish or I guess what's the word I'm looking for? Prohibit another's right to choose, then you don't have that fucking right, because you are taking that right away from somebody else. So this is where, and again, I don't want to get too philosophical here, but it's effectively like need is something that will always exist. But what, to solve for need, help must be A, voluntary, but B, those who are in need must realize that the responsibility is upon them to rise up. Because if you turn them into dependents, they will always be in need. That they'll never come out of need.
Yeah, I agree.
It's the classic give a man a fish versus teach him to fish. It's that idea.
I think once again it's such a hard topic because it's going to apply to some and not to others. It's like, I think the Australian dole system is probably a good example of it, right? So where there are people out there that need it, and they're being it's such a hard topic to talk about without fucking it up. There's people out there that need it, and there's people out there who abuse it. So people who abuse it generally take more than they need because they don't want to do any better. And then there's the people who need it but can't change their circumstances. Like people with disabilities, the elderly. There's definitely people who
I'm going to disagree straight up, dude. I'm going to challenge you on that.
You don't think old people need money?
The dole should be completely abolished. No, fuck no. The old people have people.
What about people with disabilities though? They
have people that have family, loved ones, and people that have fucking cared about them around them. There's that. There's also private institutions. There's charities. There's the capacity for people who want to voluntarily give to give. The idea that some central institution like a government or anything like that should go and rob working people of a portion of their money and give it to somebody else is completely immoral. Like, if I want to help a disabled person, I should be 100% able to do that myself for my own reasons, not because I was coerced by the government through taxation in order to fund somebody else. So absolutely not. Like, the idea of the dole is abhorrent because you cannot get away from the corruption that it spurs. It's impossible. So the only way to do it is to allow for natural institutions of support to emerge. Like, I'll use the bushfires as an example. Like, the bushfires in early 2020 in Australia, half the fucking country burnt down. 80% of the support for that came from the private sector of people donating because they wanted to fucking help. 20% of it came from the morons in government who steal through taxation 50, 60, 70% of the working population's money in Australia, and they couldn't fucking round up some sort of help. You know, Scott Morrison was over in Hawaii on holidays while the country was fucking burning down. So all of that sort of stuff, like support infrastructure, has traditionally been an emergent thing that's come from immediate family, immediate friends, the community, and through private charity. That's the best, the most functional way to do it, not through these institutions that act in the center as government, because they always get corrupted. And the only solution to the corruption that they suffer from is to keep increasing the taxes on one side of the equation so they can bring more money in to try and deal with the influx of people that are coming in and rorting it. And that is a vicious cycle. It doesn't get better. It actually just continues to get worse until the system becomes bankrupt. So it's really fucking atrocious.
Like, that'd be more of like a government issue. It's not like a person issue, right? Like I believe that people need help. I've seen people who need help, who like need it. They can't physically do it themselves. But I do agree with you that the amount of corruption that is involved from the top down it's appalling. Like, even using the bushfires as an example, most of that money donated went to the pockets of the people you're donating it to. Like, there's some like appalling statistic of like maybe 10% of what was donated out of, like, I think there was like 100 million or whatever it may be. So only 10 million went to it, and then places like the Smith family or whatever they're fucking called absorbed most of that money in fees. Like, it's, these donations are going for admin fees and shit like that. So I believe it's a systemic problem from the top down. And I think a lot of people, once again, they use that shit as an excuse to rot the system that takes it away from the people that need. I'm not saying that not everybody needs it, but to deny everybody because of the top is, I think it's a shit thing to do. I think there's a lot of people who want to get.
It has to be denied. Because it doesn't get better.
But doesn't that just fuel the top even more? Like, say if we were to get rid of the dole, for instance, like, where does that money go? Because they're still going to take it.
Well,
taxes,
unfortunately,
taxes aren't going to stop.
This goes into a deeper topic, which is we need to completely defund all governments. So everyone needs to simultaneously stop paying taxes, because the government doesn't deserve a fucking cent.
See that?
So that's a bigger problem.
We just need a better government. We just need to know that, like, our tax money is going to something decent rather than fucking funding the people getting their dick out in Parliament House it's an old fucking system that's been created for like eons ago when it maybe it was necessary, but it's definitely not needed now. That I can agree on. There has to be a better fucking system to this. Like, I think this two-party fucking pissing competition that we've made is outdated. It's fucking useless, and it's been proven time and time again that it doesn't fucking work. But the thing is, it's like nobody's coming up with a better idea. To say the two,
there's definitely better ideas.
There's definitely better, but it's not being thrown out there and backed. Like, people have their opinions on it, but nobody's like putting it to work, right?
Well, it can't be put to work whilst the existing edifice
I guess so.
exists.
Yeah,
I mean, there is one really good alternative, and that is the idea of
dictatorship.
No, well, it's not dictatorship.
I'm kidding.
It's like, localism, basically. It's like we shouldn't have nation states. The idea of a nation state is unnatural because the nation state as an organization is a bankrupt organization. It subsists through taxation of its constituents, through the ability or their monopoly on the creation of money, and through their capacity to borrow from the future, which is effectively robbing the future constituents of the society. And then what happens is they can do that in a method that is, basically it lives in the space of moral hazard, which is if you and I play a game of heads or tails, heads I win, tails you lose, for example.
Yeah.
Sorry, heads I win, tails you win, right? Or something like that. But the government, the game they play is heads they win, tails we lose. So they never lose, basically.
Yeah.
So long as that institution exists, and it can only exist through the monopoly on taxation, the monopoly on printing money, and the monopoly on borrowing from the future, which is supported through the monopoly of violence, they can continue to play an unfair game, and it only continues to get worse. Now, I call that the overlord-subject relationship. Now, the way things, I believe, will function in the future, and something like Bitcoin will bring this about, because Bitcoin eliminates the capacity for any institution, any government to A, tax, or B, inflate the money, which basically breaks them. But the only way where we move to in a sort of Bitcoin type world is a service provider and customer relationship, which is you live under a smaller local governance structure, maybe 100,000, 200,000 people at maximum. And in that society, you have the capacity to opt out. So you pay, instead of being taxed, you just pay a membership, kind of like a club, to sort of live there. And there's millions of these around the world. So instead of having 192 countries, we have 1 million cities, basically.
Yeah.
And each city has its own slight variation. And each city has a different sort of membership. Some cities might be like, look, there's no membership fee here, but, you can come and you can work, and, we'll take 10% of everything that you generate when you're working. That's how we function. Other ones might be like, look, we provide judicial services, police services, and protection from outside, and that's all we provide, and it's a fixed fee of X amount, and then everything else inside is private. You choose what you want to spend your money on and how and all that sort of stuff. And that kind of a system, that like the capacity to opt out, keeps the governor or the governing body honest. We don't have that in the world at the moment today. Like, for example, I mean, you can test this yourself. Don't pay taxes for a year, see what happens. You go to fucking jail. You don't have an option. So we don't have a customer service. We don't have a customer service provider relationship. We've got an overlord subject relationship. And again, this is only possible because governments have a monopoly on money. Now, if we strip governments of the monopoly on money, which is why something like Bitcoin is so important, they can't do that. So they naturally are forced to get smaller. Economic reality drives them into becoming smaller, becoming more functional, and running like actual businesses. And in that kind of a world, it's a very, 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 very different future than what we sort of live in today. But again, that's probably a much, much larger conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm just sort of
definitely
giving a high level of it.
I think anything to do with the government, like I said, people are going to hear this and fucking flip out. But it's so broad and so many factors that go into it that could, you know what I mean? We could, like you said, we can go on about that for hours and hours and hours and whatever. I think the thing that you bring up about Bitcoin, how it's changing how we see money, I think that's a good idea. It's something that I've recently got into myself. Like I've heard about Bitcoin for years and years and years. I remember like a friend coming up to me eons ago, and I remember it was super cheap, going like, we should just put $100 in it and leave it type thing. And I was like, it's silly because it doesn't make sense, because I think we've as humans who have subscribed to currency being attached to something, being attached to gold, or like you can go to a bank and withdraw money. But I think everything's starting to steer away from that now, with all these cryptocurrencies coming into play. And I think that outdated system of currency is changing. This is worth something tangible, whereas now, like Bitcoin, what's Bitcoin up to now? Like something
80
preposterous.
grand US?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, 80 grand Australian.
What got you into it? Like, what was the start? Was it that aspect of it's not controlled by anybody? Or it's not that it's not controlled, but it's not being abused
Well, it
by.
isn't controlled by anyone.
Yeah,
It isn't controlled by anyone. Yeah.
It's not being abused. There's still structure to it. There's still boundaries of where it can go. But once again, it's a free market, I guess. It's open doors,
correct.
right?
It's a free market. I'll give you a really easy distinction about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is about rules, not rulers.
Yeah, that's great.
And that is extraordinarily important, is that Bitcoin is completely voluntary, completely opt-in. So kind of like what I was saying before about help and need, it's completely voluntary. So if you want to, operate on the Bitcoin network, if you want to store your money, use it as a medium of exchange or as a unit of account, which are the three functions of money, you can voluntarily do that. And if you don't want to do that, you don't fucking have to.
You don't have to.
Bitcoin doesn't force you into doing it. Now, within the Bitcoin network, there are a set of clear fucking rules. It's a SHA-256 hashing algorithm. There's 21 million Bitcoin in total. It's a new block is mined every 10 minutes. The block size is 4 megabytes. So all of that, those rules are set in stone, and every single node on the network enforces those rules at a local level, but they achieve consensus globally every 10 minutes on those rules. It's fucking incredible. That is something that has never existed in the history of humanity. The ability for participants on a network to agree without knowing who the other network participants are. And that's the fundamental breakthrough of what Bitcoin represents. Now, if you think about what, money is as an idea, money's a meta idea. Money's a meta, call it a meta energy or a meta concept that has existed since the beginning of time. And maybe let's make this interactive. So how would you try and define money? Give me your best definition of money.
I think money is a trade-off for time. I think the way we've structured it, it's a trade-off of time to buy resources. You spend your time to make money, to buy things, to spend time to make money. I think it's dumb. I think money's stupid.
Yeah. Okay, you were on the right track initially, but then your last comment, I think, is really.
I think the system that we have is dumb. Rather, let's probably replace it with that. Yeah.
Cool. So that's accurate. So money is actually the most important invention of humanity. There's nothing more important on the planet than money. And that is because money is the way we are able to store the product of our labor. So if anybody values their two most precious resources, their time and their energy, they're the two fixed resources that we have. And what we do as human beings is we take our precious resource, like our time or energy, and we mix it with, maybe physical resources or something like that. And we produce a good or a service or something that may add value to other people, and those other people collectively make up the market. So that's what the function of all human beings in society is to take their scarce resource of time and energy and do something with it and input it into society. And it's measured in this meta idea of money, such that later on, different people can trade the product of their labor amongst each other without having to suffer from the limitations of things like barter, because barter doesn't work. Like if you have a fucking banana and I have an apple, but I want to shoot, it's almost impossible for us to trade, right? So money's like a fabric that binds all of society.
Yeah.
Now, the thing we've done with money over the centuries or over the millennia, in fact, is we've used different things, different objects to represent this meta idea. So money actually started off as, these promises. Like, for example, you go hunt the animal, I'll pick the berries, and someone else is going to clean the cave, and we'll sort of tally that up somewhere. And it sort of went from memory, but the human memory is not strong enough. So then we started writing it, and actually the earliest cave writings we have on the planet are actually ledgers. They are the first things that we have are cavemen fucking figuring out who did what, and that was actually primitive money. But we had to sort of go out of our caves and emerge out from there. So then we started finding objects to represent this idea of money. And, objects change from rocks to sand to fucking salt to seashells to, we used knives for a while, rice stones, all these sorts of things. And over time, over a couple millennia, we actually emerged onto a really interesting physical object to represent money. And this was an object that had a series of attributes which were really good. Now, that object, you may have guessed it already, it's gold. And the reason gold won was not just because it was some yellow shiny metal, but gold was durable, it was portable, kind of divisible, it was recognizable, it was fungible. Fungible is a really important attribute for money. So gold was one of the only things, and it actually had this benefit because it's the only solid, chemically inert element that we know of in existence. So in other words, when you find gold in its natural form, it's fucking gold. It's not mixed with anything else.
Yeah.
And it's the same whether you're in Europe, in Africa, in Australia, in Asia, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And and lastly, it was scarce. So you couldn't produce it out of fucking thin air, right? So like, shells, for example, failed as money because if you worked all your life inland and then you went and retired on the beach, all of a sudden you're a pauper, right? So gold was different in that it was scarce globally. So anyway, with those attributes, gold emerged not by some decree, not because it was mandated, but because it through its physical properties emerged all around the world, bottom up, to be the best form of money, the best mechanism to measure that meta idea of money that I was discussing. Now, this sort of happened over thousands of years, and about 500 years ago, human beings sort of wised up to the idea of, well, fuck, no one wants to carry their gold around because at this stage, the world was a bit wealthier. Each piece of gold had a much higher purchasing power than it had in the past. So now there was a risk to carrying a bunch of gold with you. So they were like, look, we're going to, and it started off with goldsmiths. The original banks were goldsmiths. They were like, store your gold here. I'll give you a receipt of how much gold you have. Now, this also served the purpose of making gold more divisible, which is, look, you got this one chunk of gold, but I'll give you 100 certificates which fractionalize that gold, and then you can use those for trade.
Yeah.
And this is sort of how banks emerged. But then somewhere along the line, somebody realized that, well, fuck, no one's actually checking what's in the vault here, so let's just issue more paper against
That's right. Yeah.
And in doing so, what they did was they started skewing the very basis upon which civilization is built. And, fast forward a couple hundred years, I'm jumping over a lot of, the intricacies here. But effectively, we live in a world now today where the issuance of money is no longer tied to not just gold, but to the actual definition of what money is, which is money represents the collective time and energy and value and input in society. These days, money is just merely what a couple bureaucrats and central bankers want to press a button and print.
Yeah,
that's all right. It is, which means it no longer represents reality. And when they do that, they do something extremely dangerous, which is because the economy is a closed system. If you produce something out of thin air on one side, it actually is paid for on the other side of the equation. So that's me, right. You, and everyone else who's holding their money that they print, we actually get poorer and they enrich themselves.
That's right.
And that is so fucking dangerous, and it creates the worst precedents for life. And what it does is it then turns into malinvestment. It turns into the heightening of time preference, which is an economic term which talks about how people value the future over the present. And like it has really bad fucking ramifications on the planet. And it's a form of theft, basically. It's a form of blind theft. Now, come 2008, Bitcoin comes in and it says, all right, here's a network, a digital network that will run completely on individual servers all around the world, who with, through proof of work, will achieve consensus on a regular basis every 10 minutes. And the rules of the network are what I sort of mentioned earlier, 21 million Bitcoin, a block every 10 minutes. Each Bitcoin is divisible to 8 decimal units, blah, 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 all these rules. You can choose to opt in these rules. You can also choose to change the rules if you want, but as soon as you change the rules, you actually fork the network and you're on your own network. You're actually off Bitcoin. You're on something fucking else.
Yeah.
And that incredible security feature, which is security through openness, is like something that has never been done before as well. And what that does is it means all of the economic masses sort of converged on Bitcoin. And over time, people are realizing that, hey, the only place that is genuinely safe for me to store the product of my labor, to store my wealth, is on something that nobody can manipulate, where nobody can change the rules. And if they change the rules, they're out of the system, which is fucking incredible. And that's what Bitcoin represents. And for me, like, to answer your original question, I originally came to Bitcoin because I thought, oh, I was going to make more dollars.
Yeah.
Now I don't see it that way. I see it purely to get the fuck away from dollars and into Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is money. All this other shit that is issued by governments is fake.
That's right. I think that'll resonate with the most people. Like I said, I only just started. Like, it's for me, it's kind of like a better way of saving money. I've never really subscribed to putting my money into a bank. Like, I have, obviously, but the saving system that they create is a bit ridiculous. Like, they hold your money, invest it, make more money, and they'll give you 0.2% over a year for them to make more money off your money. So that's why I got into it. And then you kind of, like you said, it's a better way, and everybody's talking about it, and I reckon everybody on the planet's gotten one of these emails that's get rich off Bitcoin. You know what I mean? But then you kind of, when you start to really like put money into it, and you put time into it, and you put your like a little bit of brain power behind it, you start to realize like nothing is stopping this. Nothing is, and it is the future, and it is a better system. It's, once again, it's not controlled by some, yada yada who's purely doing it to make themselves rich and to make money off your back and your time and your effort. It's a system that what you put in, it fluctuates, but it's yours. And
it actually doesn't fluctuate. The only thing that fluctuates is the relative exchange rate against Bitcoin. So Bitcoin itself has always been 21 million Bitcoin, has always been new Bitcoin being minted every 10 minutes. Like, so Bitcoin itself doesn't fluctuate. It's everything that is measured against Bitcoin fluctuates. And it sounds like semantics. It's actually a really important thing to realize is, whilst some might say, oh, Bitcoin's gone from nothing to $80,000, it's actually, the dollar has gone down 9.6% against Bitcoin.
That once you said it like that makes perfect sense.
Because that's what's happening. So like, here's a good little mental model to think about. Imagine you're able to go back 5,000 years. Yeah. And everyone was still using salt and seashells and stuff. And then you found this big yellow rock, and you're like, oh, this thing looks durable. It looks portable. It looks recognizable. It could be fungible. So let's say somehow you knew that, and you went to buy a chicken from like the market stall, back then, and you're like, all right, can I buy a chicken? And I've got this thing called gold here. Yeah. And the guy's like, what the fuck is that?
What the fuck is that?
It's the future of money.
Yeah.
He's like, well, can I eat it? Can I wear it? Can I drink it?
Yeah.
No,
There's no practical use.
Just give me shells because I don't want this yellow rock. But if you could have lived for 5,000 years, that yellow rock would buy you a kingdom. Yeah. Because the rest of the world will have caught up, not because they were told to, but because gold has better properties for money. Now, Bitcoin is the ultimate type of money. It has the perfect properties. It is ultimately portable. It is ultimately divisible. It is perfectly fungible. Like, a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin. Doesn't matter where you are. It is perfectly fucking recognizable. Like, the node verifies Bitcoin only. It is actually, unlike gold, it is actually perfectly scarce. It's a fixed amount, and that has never existed before. Like, gold isn't. We don't actually know what the total amount of gold is. So
that's right.
That scarcity actually fluctuates. So Bitcoin's actually perfect money. And all we are is we're in the early innings of the discovery by the world of a better form of money, and what I call economic Darwinism, which is, Bitcoin doesn't care if you like it or not. You should care though, and your future self should care, because if you're accepting payment today and you're holding the product of your labor, in other words, your money, if you're holding it in like dollars or euros or something like that, that's like holding shells or salt 5,000 years ago.
Yeah, that's right.
So you can do that if you want, but you're going to bankrupt yourself and you're going to destroy your own future.
That's right.
Because you're not holding the superior money.
So in terms of like Bitcoin, do you only trade Bitcoin, or do you trade it? Do you just buy it and hold it? What is your
I buy it and hold it, man. This is like
yeah
only Bitcoin. All the rest of the stuff, all the other cryptos are fucking shit coins that don't get what Bitcoin is about. Bitcoin is about demonopolizing money so that no one controls it. So you got these other idiots who come out, they launch their own crypto, and they miss the memo, which is they issue their own money. So they're no different to government. They're like saying, like all these idiots like Ethereum and all this other stuff, they're like, oh, government's bad. Trust me instead. I'll issue my own money.
I'm doing the same thing.
Like, well,
but it's on a
it's the same fucking thing.
Yeah, it's it looks a little like Bitcoin, and it's
they try and steal the narrative of Bitcoin basically, but they're giving you fiat again. So like modern money, government money is called fiat because it's issued by the decree of someone.
Yeah.
So all this other shit is all these other cryptos are digital fiat because they're just issued by a pack of nerds or a pack of cronies or a pack of whatever, and they're issuing you their own money. And there's all these people that are sitting there thinking like, oh, Bitcoin's too expensive, so maybe I'll buy this thing. And they're like, don't even understand why.
Yeah.
Like, it's wild.
I remember watching an interview recently with somebody, and they're like, even at its current state, I think it was like 65 grand. They were like, you're still better off having it than not having it. It's
Oh, mate, relatively speaking, like in terms of relative dollar terms, Bitcoin before the end of this decade will be it'll be somewhere between 6 to 60 million, somewhere in that range.
Damn, I'm going to start pumping money into it.
Like, so 6 million is a fucking low estimate. 60 million is probably a fair estimate in terms of relative price. Like, there is no one who is going to sell you their Bitcoin for fucking dollars. They would be idiots. That's like
the people who bought pizzas with it.
You their gold for salt.
Yeah.
No one's going to do that. And here's the thing: there'll be a tipping point when that comes. So think about this: a market price is where a buyer and seller meet. Now, if you had, let's say, let's use Wagyu beef as an example. There was one cow left on the planet that had the best Wagyu beef, and that was it. How much do you think that cow will get bid for?
Oh,
it'll sell for billions.
Yeah, that's right. I
guarantee you. So when Bitcoin hits that tipping point, and we are so far from the tipping point, it's not even funny. But when it does hit that tipping point, and when people start to realize that this is the only way I can keep the product of my labor safe, mate, that no one's going to sell you their Bitcoin for fucking any amount of dollars. And what you'll end up having is a gap between the buy and sell, where the first person who's willing to sell you some Bitcoin they'll be like, fuck it, you know what? I'll sell you half a Bitcoin for $1 million.
Yeah.
That then makes the market price of Bitcoin $1 million. That's going to happen so fucking fast. Everyone's head will spin. They won't understand what that means. People sort of still view Bitcoin as some sort of speculative trading asset where they can make money by trading. That's all stupidity. What you want to think about it as is like you're collecting gold, like you're finding gold over the centuries. If you could do the same thing, you're doing that with Bitcoin today. You're collecting it in small chunks and you're just putting it aside and you're waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. Because it's kind of like another analogy I'll give, and this will be the final analogy, is this idea of kind of acquiring territory, acquiring land in a place that everybody's going to want to be.
Yeah.
So Bitcoin is sort of this virtual territory. It's a world in which it's completely voluntary, it's market-driven, it's merit-driven, it's competence-driven. In that world, no one can get an unfair advantage against someone else because you can't print Bitcoin, you can't co-opt it, you can't run it for your own benefit to someone else. So everybody's going to want to go here. And as they come, there's a limited amount of territory. So the question is, what are you doing today to acquire some of that territory? Are you trying to gamble it with fucking shitcoins? Are you trying to find the right time to buy it? Are you trying to buy a dip and trying to, magically look at your the crystal ball to know when to enter? Or are you doing the intelligent thing, which is every single day or every single week, you're putting some Bitcoin aside?
That's what I'm doing.
And that, I would propose, is the best strategy.
Yeah, I think, like I said before, I think a lot of people are getting into it, and it is terrifying because it is going up so fucking quickly. And I've had a chat to a lot of people about it. And once again, I'm no way an expert, but I always use if you were to just use it as a savings account, like just look at it like that, where you're putting money into something that's making a bit of money, but there's not some dick bag taking money off the top. I think a lot of people do it and they see where it does dip, and immediately what do people do when things dip? They want to get rid of it and they sell it and to try and recoup. But I think as somebody who is sitting on like the starting line of crypto, I think it's, if a lot of people just buy it, like you said, just put a little bit in each week. That's all you got to do. But if you don't, you are going to be one of those people with the shells. As soon as they changed, gold to shells and you got 1 million shells and you're like, well, what the fuck do I do with this? You're going to be that person. And it's coming. Like it's not slowing down. It's not stopping. How many times have people said Bitcoin's going to fall on its ass? I was one of those people. I was very big. I was very big on it's fucking stupid. It doesn't make sense. Who's doing this? Who's doing that? I think that's a narrative that a lot of people will tell you, and a lot of people with their interest in cash, in their interest in the old system, they're going to tell you that narrative. But I guarantee they've invested in Bitcoin themselves. I
think a lot of people are going to have an opinion. The question is how many people actually understand and can explain to you what the actual definition of money is, first and foremost. How many people can explain to you the monetary history and how money evolved as an idea, and how many people can actually explain why Bitcoin actually represents the ultimate form of money. Very, 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 very few people on the planet can do that, and that actually reflects in how many people hold Bitcoin. And just like you sort of said, Ben, is at least with gold, the emergence of gold took a number of thousands of years. So you wouldn't have gone broke in a generation. But Bitcoin is going to compress that 5,000 years of monetary evolution into a couple decades.
Yeah, and
it's going to come so fucking fast that everyone's head will absolutely spin. This time next year, when just to give you an idea, last year, everyone was laughing at me, when Bitcoin crashed to 4,000, all this sort of stuff, when the whole pandemic bullshit started.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, this is just people being afraid and dumping their Bitcoin because they're not understanding Bitcoin. They're just sort of needing liquidity or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
And I was buying as much as I could during that drop. Like I was fucking balls deep. And the thing is, today, so Bitcoin fell to $4,000 then. So barely a year since Bitcoin was 4,000, now it's 80,000.
80 grand.
So Bitcoin moves on a daily basis what Bitcoin was worth in its entirety last year. And mark my words, it's $80,000 now. There will be $80,000 a day moves in the next year or two. So people think it's expensive, but all they're thinking about is the dollar measurement of Bitcoin, which is not how to think about Bitcoin. Is you sort of want to think about Bitcoin in terms of what's the total global monetary capitalization, and it's in the hundreds of trillions. Bitcoin's only 1.1 trillion at the moment in terms of total network value. It's going to chew up all of that 100 trillion and more. And that means Bitcoin's still got hundreds or thousands of X to go in terms of size. So we are so early in the grand scheme of things. It's just not even funny. So again, don't look at it as an investment. Look at it as the only mechanism through which you can save the product of your labor. And don't think of it in terms of making money. All you're doing is you're saving the product of your labor. And by doing that in a superior form of money, your purchasing power for that amount of money is going to increase commensurate to how many people also want to hold this thing. And man, there's nothing more important happening today. And, I urge everyone to sort of think about this shit deeper. Like, I'm sure you put some show notes in here, but, I've written about this extensively from a philosophical standpoint, from an anthropological standpoint, from a monetary and economic history standpoint. All of that stuff's there. Like, people need to learn about this, because if they don't, it's on them. But they'll be pissed off later for not doing it.
Yeah.
And there's a price to ignorance.
Buy Bitcoin, everybody. Go sell No, I'm kidding. Don't sell everything you own. Sell some things that you don't need. Jam that shit into some Bitcoin. Aleks, this has been great, man.
Appreciate it.
You got your shit going on. I like it. I enjoy it. I'm gonna tag all your stuff. Everybody, please go check him out. There's a lot of stuff that you can take away from this sort of stuff, but once again, I think there's a very clear line, especially with cryptocurrency, where it's heading, where society's heading with it. It's not one of those things that society will change and then it'll grow. The coin will grow and then we'll change around it. It's very defining.
Really
Is there anything you want to say to leave with?
No, man. Look, I think, for me, I call Bitcoin the renaissance of responsibility. I think we live in a world today where responsibility is just passed down the line and no one actually gives a shit who's responsible at some point. Bitcoin brings responsibility back to the fore, and that will have extraordinary ramifications on how society functions. If Bitcoin does anything, it removes waste on every layer of society, from an economic standpoint, from a governance standpoint, from a welfare standpoint, from all that sort of shit that we see waste in.
Yeah.
And I think people would do well to understand more of the ramifications better, and position themselves economically speaking in a better way by buying some Bitcoin. So that's that would be my final thoughts, man.
Easy as, man. All right, thanks, legend. I'll email you the show soon, but thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for coming on. Like
Absolutely.
I said, very informative, very educational. Like I said, I'm sure there's much more we could have gone on about, and this could have been hours and hours and hours. But I think we've really gotten the point.
Always another time, man.
100%. Whenever you're ready, let me know, brother.
Easy. All right, Josh. Thanks, bro.
All right, thanks, boss. See you later.
Ciao.
All right, don't look at that. Let's get rid of that. Let's try and open this one. What a ride. That was a little bit of tech issues at the start, so sorry for keeping everybody around. Aleks is a legend. He's a good dude. Once again, some of his opinions you're probably going to hear, and it'll give you a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to what it is. But I think there's a lot to take away from that, regardless of where you sit. There's a change coming. There's a very big fundamental change with how we look and deal with money. And for somebody who made as much money as he has, I think would be very ignorant to ignore that, ignore some of his advice. Once again, it's not a sell your life up and jam it into Bitcoin and wait 10 years for it to pay off. Even if you chip away at it, put little bits at a time. I think that's the key. Alrighty, guys, thank you so much. Once again, if you like it, share it. We're on all platforms. That'd be great. If you want to support the show, that'd probably be the best way. Leave a review. That'll get us up the list a little higher. If not, if you want to go a little further, we've got the subscriptions on Buy Me a Coffee, or make a donation to GoFundMe. Let's grow the show and let's keep this bad boy going. Thanks a lot.